Commissioner Randy Ambrosie put the odds on a CFL expansion to the Maritimes in the near future at over 100%, Justin. On a scale from 1 to 10, Ambrosie said it's an 11. How do you interpret that statement?
To me, he's saying it's a certainty that the Atlantic Schooners are going to be playing football at some point in the near future out in, it seems like, Halifax. So what we need to give Ambrosie credit for here is something that he didn't do recently with the 4-down topic that caught like wildfire and got a lot of people upset. And I still don't necessarily believe his words, but he's come out and made a definitive statement here saying, we're serious about going to Atlantic Canada and making this happen. Now, that's great, but you still need to go ahead. And the most important thing, JC, you know this, is to get a stadium built out there, to have municipal and provincial support for the team, because it doesn't sound like to me, based on the previous history and how they were going to get the funds together to construct the stadium, that Schooner Sports and Entertainment is going to foot the entire bill, maybe with the CFL and some of its owners helping out. So that's the critical factor here. Now, maybe behind the scenes, in all fairness, they've talked to the power players out there and feel like there's a sense of optimism and that they could get some taxpayer funds to help out. But until that ball gets rolling again, then I have a hard time seeing this being at an 11. That said, I do like the positivity, and we all want to see that 10th team to make the CFL truly coast to coast.
We really do, but I think this is a bit of a dangerous statement based on the information that we know publicly right now, which is that the money was there for a stadium and it got pulled because of COVID. Now, hopefully, what this statement indicates is exactly what you said, that there's been movement behind the scenes, that there's been some handshake deals with, the provincial or the municipal government out there, that a stadium will be on its way. And I think there is some buzz about this upcoming touchdown Atlantic game in Acadia next year between Toronto and Saskatchewan, that perhaps this is a launch pad for talks that expansion is a certainty and that some more information will come out at that time. Right now, we're not privy to that. So to say this, if that's not the case, I think is a little bit short-sighted, because we've heard this before. We've had promises of expansion with the Schooners that have fallen through. So everyone's a little bit on eggshells when it comes to that. But if Ambrosie is indicating that he knows things that we don't, then it's a very positive sign.
There was a lot of positivity before the pandemic for SSE, Schooner Sports and Entertainment, and the Atlantic Schooners to get going, because they had been granted conditionally that $20 million from the Halifax regional municipality to go towards a stadium. So if that's the idea and where the positivity is coming from, that they could get back into the mix there, because they did, let's say, win that vote to have access to the cash at the time, then I would think, yeah, it seems reasonable that they could get there. The other interesting part that came out of Ambrosie's statement on this to me, and there was some people on Twitter saying, well, how do you go from 10 to 12? Because Ambrosie was talking about Quebec City as a possible expansion location. And then, okay, if you get to 11, well, where's the 12th franchise? Some people have talked about Saskatoon, and there's been some other places bandied about. But I think it's a fair point that some of the people made on Twitter. I can't believe I'm going to say this, but you need to just focus in on 10, do it really well before you even think about going to 11 or 12. Let's see if the CFL can do 10 really well, because there's some markets we all know right now, Toronto, Montreal to a degree, and BC, that are struggling. So hopefully they can do 10 really well. And then if that goes well after a few years, hopefully along the lines of the Ottawa Redblacks, then I think potentially you look at 11 or 12. Now, when Quebec City was brought up, it's certainly intriguing because the Laval Rouge et Or have done so well there in terms of drawing fans, creating a tailgate atmosphere, and they support football whether the Rouge et Or are playing or not. There's a lot of Laval jerseys in the stands there when they've hosted Vanier Cups over recent years that I've been there on the ground with. So they're supportive of football, but they're hardcore, especially about the Laval Rouge et Or. So I'm not necessarily sure that you could turn all of those people into Quebec City CFL football fans, let's say, and then there might even be some competition. But depending on the way you go about it, and if you get creative, if those two entities work together, then you could have a way where maybe you can create football weekends there, football doubleheaders, like we're seeing the Edmonton Elks do with the University of Alberta Golden Bears. And it's a win win for everybody. So I like the idea and the thought process, but let's do 10 really well before we start going to 11 or 12.
Yeah, in fairness to Ambrosie, the question that was asked of him used the number 12. So that's how he came to the number 12 in that particular context. But I did have someone who would know, all the details about what's going on in this country in terms of football tell me that Laval is in Quebec City, it's a non-starter for a CFL franchise. Like it's a pipe dream based on what's going on there with the Rouge et Or and how that's all set up. It's not in the imminent future at all, and Ambrosie knows that. So to bring it up is more for optics than anything else. Now, I'd love to see it. I'd love to see 12 teams. I'd love to see a team in Quebec City, but it is going to be difficult. And we're talking about, I think, decades of legwork in terms of getting, instead of touchdown Atlantic games, touchdown Quebec City games, to try and get your foothold here, because there is some cultural aspects too when it comes to the CFL, and we don't appreciate this enough because things have stabilized in Montreal. But for a long time, there's been division, francophone, anglophone, when it comes to Canadian football, which has always been seen as more of a anglophone hierarchy, as it were, or an anglophone sport. And now Quebec City has had a lot of success, and Laval has had tons of success with the sport. The CEGEP system is strong, but it still hasn't necessarily translated in francophone communities in terms of dedication to particular CFL franchises. So there's still a disconnect there that's deeply rooted, goes back decades, and you'll have to put in some hard work to undo some of that.
Let's just do 10 well and then see where it goes from there.